Hello guys and welcome to the channel. This is Roll. In today's video I want to answer a question I've got multiple times now, which what I think of the new relics, especially with the relic of the Wayfinder that interested a lot of people. So I'll be going through them very fast and tell you what do I think of them, what builds they will affect, or if they will change anything. So those are the new relics. You can unlock them through achievement or playing in World vs World. I myself had some boxes of the World vs World stuff laying around, so I unlocked them with it without doing anything in PvE or whatever. So from the get-go, we have the Relic of Founding, and it will give you a barrier when you successfully combo field with a leap finisher. So it's something that really suits a scrubber, for example, someone who can actually have a lot of fields and a lot of leap finisher to utilize it. And for something like scrubber, it really offers even extra push to the plane around barrier. It's a low health, a low toughness, especially with a power build that can have great defensive ability through barrier itself, and you increase the gameplay into this aspect. But for ranger, we don't have this much leap finisher. It's not worth it for us. For my druid, for example, the build I ruin, I have no leap finisher whatsoever. We have more blast finisher, something like that. And even if you're running a power build with sword and you can combo with a leap finisher or something like the healing spring, or traps or smoke scale field, it's still like 2 leap finisher or something like that, so not much worth considering. So if the build can utilize it, something like scrubber, it can be quite decent, and I see use for it for some builds if you want it. Now for Relic of Mosyn, it will remove a non-damaging condition whenever you evade an attack. One condition removed, and with internal cooldown of 1 second, so clearly you wouldn't dodge multiple people and all of them cleanse you, so you cleanse every condition you had on you. But it's only non-damaging also, which means since it requires an evade, it will not work for immobilize. Immobilize is non-damaging condition and you can't dodge while being immobilized, except if you have something like resistance or any method that will evade while immobilized, like using quick shot will actually make you dodge. Haven't tested it, so I'm not sure if it's actually just evading or an actual dodge, but I would say it's simply just evading. I don't think it requires an actual dodge. And non-damaging condition will not kill you. You want to have a cleanse to help with actually cleansing, like the actual damaging condition. So I don't consider it to be this good, and I think there's many other better option to run over this. Because remember, if you run a relic, that means there is another relic you are not running. So maybe for power untamed or power Soulbeast, if you're running this trait, like in PvP or something, when you remove a dodging will actually remove a condition, so you combo that with it, and now you back almost to the old idea of removing one damaging and one non-damaging, stuff like that. But like I said, I don't consider it to be this good. Now the third relic is Relic of Sorcerer, and this one is quite good for some things, but also it competes with different options. When you inflict a cripple, cheer, or immobilize, you also inflict vulnerability, and it have an internal cooldown of 1 second. But guess what? It actually doesn't, the internal cooldown will trigger once the trigger happens. So, if we put it on my druid like that, I can trigger it on multiple targets at the same time if the immobilize or cripple or whatever happen at the same time. So as you see, vulnerability because of every stack of immobilize, vulnerability, and again vulnerability. So every enemy can still get it because the immobilize tick at the same time. And again, I can do the same thing with the signet. As you can see, vulnerability will happen here also and here also. So it can be very good. There is multiple uses for it, like with if you can cleave with chill fields, like traps, like for something like Reaper, it can be very good. For something like Condition Necro in general, it can be very good when you bump the enemy with multiple condition and you just want to have more, so you add multiple sources for different condition. Like now you would have an extra vulnerability that you couldn't access if it doesn't exist in your build. So it can be very useful for builds like this. But again, if you run it, you're not running a better option. So I can see some use for it. It will increase your damage, it is vulnerability, and even for something like Druid or even for Power Druid, it will increase your damage for every tick. So while you burst an enemy inside Entangle or other thing, it's like an extra 5% damage for both your power and condition damage. So I can see use for it, especially utilize it with tools like this, like Entangle. Besides, it's not only triggered on Mobilize, it also will trigger on Cripple, it will trigger on Chill. So even for Untamed, while you're applying a Chill on the enemy and another source of Cripple, you can have multiple stacks of vulnerability quite fast, up to 10 easily. So I see use for it if you want it, but it will compete for other mobility, for cleansing, for other damage sourcing, especially for condition builds. Why not running Demon Queen? You can apply poison and lower the healing for the enemy, so why go for something as simple as vulnerability? But I can see a use for it. I myself will not give up the mobility. I run a rumor build on outnumber fights all the time, and I wouldn't care for a simple increase for my damage from vulnerability or even as a cover condition, since I can have insane amount of condition sources easier from simply something like Celestial Avatar. You can already apply Mobilize, Bleed from those. Your shortbow skills have poison, cripple, and you can apply slow and another cripple, and you can cover people with a lot of conditions, especially with something like Iboga, even Confusion and Torment. So I myself don't see myself use. Now, Relic of the Twin General. This relic will give you 6 stacks of might when you use a healing skill, because it will apply damage to the enemies around you. It will give you this might and will give you extra stack of might for every target hit, and will apply to those enemies weakness. The numbers are lower in World vs. World. It's I think it's 8 might in PvE. So it's a great source for might. It have an internal cooldown of 10 seconds, so if you can utilize the cooldown even, it's much better. So if you heal with something like a mantra or with a short cooldown healing whatsoever, especially with an instant casting, or if you are on a class that can afford to blow the healing from the get-go, to have this spike in might to increase its damage, like one-shot builds. So something like a Mesmer with a mantra, Reaper with heal as one, even applying weakness while you're trying to catch the enemy and not allowing them to kite. It will lower the endurance regeneration, so makes them dodge less and lower their damage too, so they can't like bunch back in a way. So I can see use for it in some builds, especially like one-shot builds or a build that really try to catch the enemy very fast. But for most ranger builds, you don't allow yourself to actually blow this much healing from the get-go, even if you use something like heal as one to copy boon back and forth in a power build with high damage. Still, it's not the best option to simply blow it from the get-go. Unlike Reaper, for example, you enter Shroud, so you can do things like this. You can use heal as one on Reaper simply to gain life force, to allow yourself for better enter to Shroud. So some builds can use it, some build doesn't. It work with one-shot builds or builds that can really want to have the spike from the start of the fight, and even happening inside the fight itself will be decent every time you heal to keep up the might within the fight itself. But it's a power build style. It's not great for condition. You don't care for a momentary spike for a condition build, and it's also competing with other relics like Relic of the Midnight King. It will give you 1 stack of might and fury every time you disable an enemy, and only in 1 second internal cooldown. So even if it won't have the same spike, it helps you keep up 2 different boons, and it can allow you to get those boons for you and allies. So it doesn't give you only the boons, it will give you and your allies, which mean your bet for ranger, your minions, if you run around for necro, whatever you're running. And even for your bait, you can copy back and forth. So within the fight, the way it's moved, you will even have a better access to boons, especially if you have a boon duration to even increase the amount of fury and the amount of might. So having different option is great, but also will make you have to choose between. Now we get to the 2 important ones. The one I get the most asked about, which is the Relic of the Wayfinder. So will that replace my Relic of Speed for World vs. World? The short answer is absolutely not. Why? Because this relic basically works like swiftness. Its movement speed increased by 25% in combat, and outside of combat it's 33%, so it's basically swiftness. The only advantage that you have over simply running swiftness from whatever skill is that it will give you super speed on entering combat by 2.5 seconds World vs. World, and I think it's like 4 seconds in PvE. The movement speed itself cannot be corrupted or removed like swiftness, so you will not have those moments of you're extremely slow. You'll always have it, it's constant, you don't have to even think about it. However, I don't have any real defensive measures. I don't have blocks, I don't have invuln, I'm not a willbender who can simply jump on people and kill them all, none of them doing damage to me inside my F3 or something like that, no. I take every damage and I heal through it. Which means I need to be able to move more than my enemy, especially with only a single skill for movement. While if you fight something like Wayfinder or Thief or Mesmer, they have multiple boards, they can move better than you. So the only edge you can have to be hard to catch so you can fight an outnumber situation is to increase this movement speed. So they would have to blow more skills to chase you than you. If you use this skill and another druid even use it to catch you, you will still run faster than them. So they would have to use another skill. While if you two have the same movement speed, even a melee class can keep, while you're running like that, can keep cleave you from behind. You would dodge to front like that, they would dodge behind you or use a single gap closer and they can simply keep attacking with a melee skill just like that. And the worst case scenario also, if you're fighting an enemy with a speed relic and you run in Wayfinder, once this super speed is gone, he's even faster than you. So it's not only he's keeping up with you, he's moving in front of you. Like, let's say I'm a druid and I'm hitting another ranger or another druid and he's running the Wayfinder relic. I can move even past them and cast this skill so they get into the immobilize because I'm in front of them. The cast time will make me still put it in front of them, which is a huge downside to the Wayfinder. So where do I see use for the Wayfinder? First, the extremely relaxing gameplay when you don't have to run a signet or consider even swiftness in open world PvE. It's a really great choice to have in the game. It's like a signet that wouldn't make you lose a skill slot or have to put swiftness from whatever source in your build, like from traits or other skills. No, you would simply slot this relic and forget about it. And I would see use for builds who can actually utilize the super speed, for example. One-shot builds that really engage the enemy and try to oppress it. So the enemy would burn a lot of cooldown just trying to survive this initial engagement. So I can see use for it for PvP. Like even for druid when you don't have to keep constantly thinking about swiftness. But I wouldn't myself run it. But for something like Power Untamed, for example, the one-shot build that people run in PvP, they probably run this skill. And after change it for quickness, even if you run something like Quickening Zephyr, you will not blow Quickening Zephyr, a stun break, and maybe a Condition Cleanse depending on your build just to get the super speed. So you would teleport on the enemy with this skill, gaining quickness, obviously while unleashed, and you would hit them with your unleash skill, like if it's mace, to immobilize them, and even if they cleanse, you'll be on top of them with super speed just from the get-go, from the initial moment of the fight. And the amount of damage you apply, since you're a power build and you have you're trying to even to one-shot them, these small windows are very useful to use a relic like that. But for my builds, especially for condition builds, I don't see it as a good thing. We don't need the super speed or the increase in movement speed in the get-go from the fight. We don't need it in the start from the fight. You need it when we need to start kiting. We need it when we need to survive, not in the initial engagement. Because condition builds usually have longer fights in really, if you're a good player fighting a good player. And for druid it's even worse, because for druid we can catch the enemy. We don't need this speed to chase. A simple immobilize, entangle, even a cast of this skill from distance. We have multiple ways to keep the enemy in place. We don't need the super speed to try to catch them and move our camera behind them. So I don't see myself using Relic of the Wayfinder in any serious manner. Like I said, maybe PvP just to relax, and if I'm running a build that I don't need to constantly think about swiftness, and the only source for it for me is quick shot, unless I'm in combat, weapon swipe with the trait Windtail will give me another source of swiftness. Now the last relic is Relic of Zakiros. This relic gives you 7% in competitive and 4% in PvE. So what it does, it will convert the outgoing critical strike damage into healing by this percent, so 4% in PvE, only while under the effect of Fury. So this conversion is not an extra damage, you only heal yourself. So it's a survivability relic if you want to think about it. For competitive, it's compete with the Relic of Norse in both competitive and in PvE, but in competitive the increase to damage and reduction is only 10% for Relic of Norse, and it's not constant as the other relic. So if you have a permanent Fury and a 100% critical chance, so everything you do will work, for Relic of Zakiros that means it's a permanent effect. While for Relic of Norse, it's only under the effect of Norse's hunger. So 7% comparing to 10%, I see a lot of people might, if they want, to actually run Relic of Zakiros. The idea is flipped in PvE, because this relic is buffed in PvE while Zakiros is actually nerfed. this relic become 15% and 25% for increased damage, while the Relic of Zakiros only get lower to 4%. As you can see in PvE, I gain increased damage and condition damage by 25%, lower the incoming damage by 15%, and I can turn all my power damage that applied into healing by 15% for the duration of the effect, which is 5 seconds. You gain this effect on an interval of 3 seconds, so every 30 seconds you will have this effect. You can heal yourself, you apply increased damage, but otherwise you don't have anything. However, with a build like the Untamed, if you want, you can even gain more stacks faster because it happens on interval, or if you remove boons from enemies. So you would have to run this straight. Corrupting Vines, because bits removing of boons does not count, which mean with Let Loose, every time you hit your Unleash skill for this weapon and then remove for another weapon and you hit both of them, if the enemy have boons, you will even gain faster stacks. It's not obviously a consistent thing because not everywhere in PvE the enemy would actually have boons. So think of it as if you have this effect for 5 seconds every 30 seconds. With Untamed, again, we have multiple damage reduction. We have our Elite by 50%. We have the WvW the Untamed. If our bit is unleashed, we gain 25% damage reduction. That's permanent as long as our bit's unleashed. We gain permanent protection back and forth from this trait, and even with Turtle, we can have even more protection like that. So multiple ways to reduce incoming damage on us. And even healing sources, because the trait Nurture Fortitude make our unleash skills, unleash ambush skills. When you have this effect on you, you have access to the skill and you can use it. So every about 9 seconds or 10 seconds you can use it twice because you switch your weapon and you access the other one, which means you can heal for this amount of time, this life steal, and the extra amount for multiple targets you hit constantly. So combine damage reduction, combine permanent regeneration from different sources, even protection from here, even protection from this skill if you need it as damage reduction, and you can have healing from the mace and regeneration and healing from the ambush skill even extra. So multiple healing sources, multiple damage reduction, and even when the damage is so much heavy, after 30 seconds you can just fill up your health completely. Besides, you gain an extra damage for those 5 seconds, while the other relic doesn't give you that. So it's consistency that's always happening, or a huge spike that happen when you really need it. If you apply a huge burst on those 5 seconds, you would fill your entire health bar so easily. It's like a smaller version of this trait, Restorative Strike. And I tested both of them on extreme damage field in the raid training area, and I would say it was much easier to stay alive with Norse's relic than actually with Zakiros, because it's only 4% comparing to 15%, and that is huge. For some builds that this is not really this great and you need this constant time, or for an easy encounter when the constant healing is better than a spike, maybe I see people use Zakiros. It's like different options, and Zakiros can become very stable when the build have almost a linear amount of damage. You don't keep moving from a burst to another on something just relaxing or something like that. But I would say for survivability, I would consider Nurses to be still my go-to choice. But they are very close to each other, so I don't see much difference. You can use this and you can use this. It's not really a great difference. At least the other one's consistent. This one you have to kind of think about it when you're going to apply this in same burst. Once the effect on you, you need to apply as much damage as possible if you have low health to begin with. So that's it for all those relics. Tell me what you think in the comment, or if I missed anything, share your thoughts and ask questions, and I'll see you next time. Peace.